So this week we're headed back to Lake Erie with the drop shot to get after some of those big summertime smallmouth. Stay tuned right here as we talk everything drop shot. But first, let's roll the intro. So on this trip north, it was all about the Mayfly hatch. You know, the Mayfly hatch is something that, if you've never seen it in person, is pretty amazing on the Great Lakes in the sense that those things put a layer. It's like a dusting of snow every morning when you go out. All the Mayflies that are all over your boat, all over your gear. It's just kind of an incredible thing. But, you know, to me, that's what makes the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, so special, is the abundance of life. Pull up, drop the trolling motor, first cast. This is how it's supposed to go. And this is how it's not supposed to go. This fish loss is purely on me. I got in too big of a hurry to get to the net. You know, these smallmouth, as soon as they're hooked, they go airborne. So I really created a bad hook angle here by dashing for the net too soon. So before we get to the fishing, let's talk about this huge boat in the background. Of all my years of coming up to the big lake, this is the first time I've truly seen a super yacht. In fact, this boat was so big it couldn't get in the base. The Scout is an $85 million vessel, 209 feet long, 38 feet wide. Just an incredible sight to see up close on the Great Lakes.
There we go. There's a good one, Jason. I don't know what it is. It's a monster.
We had one rough day of 2 to 4 footers, and Dad and I still got out and tried to do a little walleye fishing. But the Great Lakes always present this challenge. No matter when you go up, it seems like there's always one day out of 4 or 5 that you'll have a blow day where the wind just doesn't let you fish, or at least where you want to fish. Dad and I got out in the morning, managed to find a few walleye despite the weather. I am an amateur walleye fisherman, but here we are setting lines, running planer boards, and we're running some bandits. You know, and that's what we had the most success on this morning, catching walleye, was on those bandits. Again, you can go over to lurenet.com, pick those up, use the code KENNER15 to save a little bit of money. But for me, this trip was all about the drop shot. You know, in the summertime, it seems like the lake, especially from the pressure, the last couple of years, the Bass Islands get a lot more pressure than they ever have. And I think that's one of the reasons that the drop shot has become the player that it is. You know, it's a finesse technique. I'm just gonna tie a Palomar knot. I don't use a swivel. A lot of people use a swivel and it does help prevent line twists, but I retie a lot. So I'm just gonna run my hook straight up. I'm just gonna tie a Palomar, a big Palomar, and I'm gonna leave a big tag end, okay? Now that tag end is gonna be your leader. So depending on how long of a leader you may want to leave a little more slack in your knot, okay? So, again, I'm pulling my tag in through, okay? Now, one thing you notice here, my hook is facing straight up, okay? You can twist that and manipulate it a little bit to where you can get it hanging straight up, but we want that hook to be straight up, okay? And you can see I've left a tag in here, not a ton here, just for demonstration purposes in this video. And then I'm just gonna tie an old basic cinch knot here on the sinker. Okay, so there you can see just a basic drop shot rig. All right, I can rig this really quickly, especially out there on the water on our drop shot setup, okay? I just want to hook the nose. Now, what you use here is really up to you. You know, there's been kind of the flatworm rage the last 2 years. I think a lot of people, when they first start fishing a drop shot, they think of it more as a vertical technique. You know, for me, especially with live scope, you know, I'm running live scope in perspective mode, and it just gives me an incredible advantage to be able to see the rocks and the boulders and things out in front of me so that I can flip to that structure. But the drop shot has a lot of action itself on the Great Lakes. You know, you saw the one moment we were fishing with the whitecaps and the big waves, and you know, if you think about it, you're sitting there on your boat and your rod, you're moving, the boat's moving. You know, that drop shot's just going to have a ton of action in the water under those circumstances. So honestly, it's a bait like the Ned rig where less is more. The less you do with that bait, as long as you're putting it in those prime areas, the fish seem to eat it regardless of what you're doing. Now, personally, I love wind on the Great Lakes. I think the fish bite better. I think the toughest bite is on the flattest days. Waves are good. Had to go. Couldn't really tell where we were at, but they're definitely built. So I use the South Bass Island weather buoy and the Lake Erie Open Lakes forecast to try to keep an eye on the weather. But probably the best indicator of weather on the Great Lakes can be the smokestacks from the power plants. You know, I was in fishing tight and I noticed that smokestack can continue to lay on over. So I had to get going. You know, there's some solid 2 to 3 foot waves here. Camera never does waves justice. You know, once I made that turn behind Rattlesnake, I'm running perpendicular to the waves and I'm using the land for a shelter here, so the waves aren't nearly as bad right here behind Rattlesnake as they were out in the open water. But on the Great Lakes, you just have to be strategic in how you run. You know, like I said, I probably could have battled these waves straight on, but had I initially turned the direction I was going, I would have gotten drowned from the spray. I spent some time trying to catch some fish on Topwater. Had a couple blow-ups, but nothing really to brag about. Caught some fish on the toad runner, caught some largemouth in the bays on the toad runner. Also caught some fish you saw on Jack's Custom Jigs, that fire crawl. It's been a good bait for me this year. one of the things the tips that I would give you on the Great Lakes, whether you're throwing the net or the drop shot, you know, the wind dictates how heavy that weight is for me, and depth obviously. But if the wind's pretty heavy, I'm gonna have a little heavier weight on the bottom of this drop shot or on that Ned rig. And then at the same time, if the water slicks off and it gets flat, I'm gonna have a little lighter weight. And the reason being, you know, the bottom's pretty gnarly on Lake Erie with all the zebra mussels and you know, the different forms of life down there. So, you know, you can even see this line here that I used is somewhat beat up and frayed. So you have to retie a lot. If you have too heavy of a weight and the water slicks off, you're gonna have a lot more trouble with, number one, losing. And you're gonna lose a lot of these when you fish on the Great Lakes with a drop shot. You're gonna lose a lot of your weight. So just plan for that. That's why I usually buy the big pack. But nonetheless, you know, and the same on the big circle hook. You're gonna lose some lures doing this. But I don't want this to get down in that stuff as opposed to just kind of skirting across the top. And if the water slicks off and I've got too heavy of a weight, it'll get down in those grooves of those rocks and those zebra mussels, and it'll cut your line. You'll lose a lot of these sinkers. So again, my weight is entirely dictated by how rough the water is or how slick the water is. And that can have a huge impact on your success as a fisherman.
Telling you, when the catfish are eating it, that's a good sign. Hello?
Hey, what are you doing?
I'm fishing over here by sugar.
Any good?
I caught 2 good ones, and I've caught a bunch on the drop shot.
So for me, part of the challenge and part of the fun of the Great Lakes is getting offshore, trying to find stuff that nobody else is fishing, stuff that's not getting a lot of pressure. And a lot of times you can find some quality bites out here. And that's what happened here. You know, I lost a giant and followed it up about 5 casts later with another giant, lost both fish. You know, and part of that is on me, you know, and that's part of the reason they get big. They don't get big being caught. But nothing gets me jacked up like a big fish. You know, that's what drives this whole passion for me, and I love to get out, take my electronics, use perspective mode, and see what I can find.
Big fish kill me, man. I get so jacked. Top freaking knot. I mean jacked. If I just get my hands to start shaking, that'd be good. Struggling with that.
This week's boat captain of the week, this guy. You know, I'm running a wide angle lens here, and the wide angle lens makes the distance really hard to judge. I could have cast and hit the side of this boat. People never cease to amaze me around the Bass Islands. You know, last video we had the guy that ran up on the rocks. You know, those big cans out there marking the channel, they're there for a reason. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and hit me up with a comment down below, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the video.
There's more 4-pound smallmouth in Lake Erie than any other lake I've ever been on.